Let's just make sure the stream comes up, and then we'll begin. Okay. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Very good. Welcome to you all. Welcome also to the many viewers watching this satsang online. We have a lot of great questions again, and we will alternate. We'll take questions, mostly from online since there are so many more, but we will also take questions from our local students here. And there are probably more questions than we can get to, so if I fail to get to your question, I'm sorry. First question is from Jay in New York. Why is moksha preferable to the Abrahamic idea of eternal heaven? How do you know eternal heaven is a fact? The Bible says it's a fact. Can you personally verify that heaven is eternal? No. Can you personally verify that by gaining moksha, you put an end to suffering? Yes. That's the difference. So Jay says, wouldn't eternal bliss be better with a body and mind? The idea is that you go to heaven with some kind of body and mind. Well, better or not, we don't know. How do we know it exists at all? An Abrahamic, eternal heaven. So one thing, and by the way, the same discussion applies to a Hindu heaven. So moksha is held to be preferable to Hindu heaven for a different reason. Actually, in both the Abrahamic heaven and the Hindu heaven, neither one of them are verifiable. So we don't know for sure that they exist. But the Hindu heaven has another problem. It's not eternal. You go for, it's like a vacation. You go to heaven, then you come back. So anyway, the real reason moksha is preferable is it is a verifiable truth, something you can discover and benefit from here and now. Next question from Prashanto, who's in Bangladesh. Most spiritual paths recommend the life of solitude and contemplation. I'm not sure you can generalize like that, most spiritual paths, because in the Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna does not exactly tell Arjuna, not exactly means Sri Krishna does not tell Arjuna to live a life of solitude and contemplation. So instead of saying most spiritual paths, we can say many spiritual paths recommend life of solitude and contemplation. That's certainly true. Why is solitude instrumental in gaining enlightenment? Well, the fact that Sri Krishna tells Arjuna not to live a life of solitude shows that solitude is not instrumental. It's not crucial. Helpful? Perhaps. Crucial? Absolutely not. What is crucial is atma vichara, self-inquiry. And certainly it's true that solitude and contemplation are helpful in supporting a life of self-inquiry. But I don't think any of you here are monks. And among our online viewers, except for those who might happen to be monks, you're all busily engaged in a life full of activities and not too much solitude, and some time for solitude and contemplation, but probably not a lot. But here we are right now, enjoying a moment of relative solitude and a moment especially intended for contemplation. This is all that's needed. You don't need to give up worldly activities. You do need to make sure that in your daily life there are opportunities for atma vichara, for self-inquiry. Then, from Kartik, Kartik is in India, many people place their faith in astrology and horoscopes, especially in India, relying on predictions about their futures based on positions of celestial bodies, especially when it comes time to finding a marriage partner in an arranged marriage. That tends to be something done. Or when should the marriage be performed? That's the next one. At which day and what time of day? Okay, all of this is done. Science has made it clear that astrology is a pseudoscience. What are your views? Astrology is a pseudoscience. Means it's not science. Does that mean it's not? Does that mean it's right or wrong? Neither. It means that it's not science. So astrology is part of a complex belief system. Is the belief system right or wrong? You might know that we've had this discussion before. If we knew it was right or wrong, it wouldn't be a belief system. If we could prove astrology worked, it wouldn't be a matter of belief. If we could prove that astrology didn't work, it wouldn't be a matter of belief. But we can't prove one way or the other. It's a matter of belief. One thing we know for sure is this. Whether or not astrologers are accurate, whether or not astrology works or not, we're undecided. Whether or not astrologers are accurate or not, we know very well. Astrologers are often wrong. That's a fact. That we know for a fact. Astrology may work, but we know for a fact that astrologers are often wrong. Okay. Next question from Om Prakash in Texas. Om Prakash writes, I mentioned last week that samadhi is not required for enlightenment. Let me just develop that a little bit more before we answer Om Prakash's question. Meditation is necessary to prepare the mind. Samadhi is a particular meditative experience. In fact, Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras describes 7 different kinds of samadhi. We need not get into these details. 7 different kinds of meditative experience. And the question is, are these meditative experiences necessary for the sake of enlightenment? If we understand enlightenment properly, enlightenment is to understand your true nature. Tell me, is your true nature only present in samadhi? Your true nature is equally present right now, isn't it? Which means your true nature is present in this ordinary experience just as much as your true nature is present in a meditative experience. So, what Shankaracharya and the entire tradition of Advaita Vedanta teaches is that a proper Vedantic analysis of this ordinary experience is capable of leading you to discover your true nature as Satchidananda Atma. Ordinary experience is enough. Are spiritual experiences helpful? Most of the time, yeah, sure, why not? I'm smiling, remembering when I was young. Early on I had a number of amazing experiences. It was great. Did I get enlightened from any of that? Not at all. But I sure enjoyed those early experiences. One thing they did, however, is they made me highly motivated. That's all. So you don't get enlightened from a special experience, but it may be motivating to have them. But in the absence of such experiences, there's no problem whatsoever. Okay. One more question here. This is from Jayant. Doesn't say where he lives. Jayant, how do I grow out of my intense desire to eat certain food items and avoid other food items? How did you manage your cravings as a novice monk? So the question is a good one, dealing with how do we handle desires. And sure, there's no cell phone there. That I don't know where that's coming from. No, that's far enough away. No problem. Okay. Sorry for the interruption. How do I grow out of my intense desire to eat certain food items? If you forbid yourself from eating those food items, do you outgrow your desire? Let me just see if that's really coming from that one. I think it is. I just turned down the volume on that. Notice if you have, I like ice cream. I admit it. Of course, wait a minute. Swamiji, if you're enlightened, why do you have a desire for ice cream? Yeah. Suppose there's no ice cream available. Okay. Who cares? No, that's it. So we distinguish between a binding desire and a non-binding desire. A desire whose fulfillment pricks you, and a desire whose unfulfillment doesn't cause any pricking. We can call it a preference instead of a desire. So, if you have a desire for ice cream, and you decide I'm just not going to, you tell your spouse, no more ice cream in this house. So your spouse gets punished along with you. I don't know if that's fair or not, but anyway, sometimes that it works like that. But does that work? Does that get rid of your desire? No. Jayant correctly uses the word, how do I grow out of it? How do I outgrow the desire? And the way desires work is when you find something better, the prior desire goes away. So when you find something better than ice cream, I don't know what's better than ice cream. Sorry for being a little silly, but this is the process of outgrowing. When we find something better, then okay, I'll have that. Who cares about this ice cream? I'll have that instead. And the way Vedanta addresses this is when you discover that your true nature is innately full, complete, content, limitless, boundaryless, then who cares about ice cream? Who cares about anything better than ice cream? Who cares about any worldly source of enjoyment? So here's the principle. If one desire is outgrown by finding... We need to add a little detail here. Why do you desire ice cream in the first place? Ice cream is desired, presuming you like ice cream. Ice cream is desired because it seems to be a source of happiness. Seems to be. We know very well that happiness is not an ingredient in the ice cream, but it seems like it. We become happy when we eat it. So we say then that ice cream is one apparent source of happiness. Let me do it in this direction. It's the right direction for you. I want to go left to right for you. So Ice cream is an apparent source of happiness. Your desire for ice cream, it goes away when you find a better apparent source of happiness. That desire goes away when you find an even better apparent source of happiness. By extension, all desires go away when you find the true source of happiness and contentment. We say that discovering your true nature then leads to the removal of all desires. Or better to say, all binding desires are converted into non-binding desires. Or to say, all desires are converted into preferences. Not that, if you like ice cream and you become enlightened, will you stop eating ice cream? I didn't. Okay, sorry, I'm being a little silly today. Okay, let's take some questions here. You need the microphone. Go ahead.
So this mind is stuck on yesterday's Advaita Gita, where you said that it's a practice where you contemplate, like every single day. You have done this for decades. Where what have I accomplished, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I thought like there's nothing to accomplish in the because once you find
when you're enlightened, there's nothing to accomplish.
So I don't.
This is a practice you do before you get enlightened.
Oh, okay, so it's just for okay. Okay. Right.
So what I described was a very powerful practice, a practice which is helpful not just in spiritual life, but all aspects of life. Our discussion in yesterday's class was about being paramatma, being diligent, being focused, recognizing the value of life in general and the value of each and every day. And what I suggested is a good practice is at the end of the day, you ask yourself, what have I accomplished today? That's a great practice. By the way, since many people are listening to this, let me put an addendum to that. If you are currently struggling with depression and low self-esteem, that's not the right time for this particular practice, because that practice can actually add to depression and low self-esteem. But if you are in a good mental space, as we say, if you are healthy mentally, then this is a great practice. At the end of each day, you ask yourself, what have I accomplished? And that will give tremendous motivation. In my case, I did that especially to help me in my spiritual growth, but for obvious reasons. I can help you in any aspect of life. Help you remain diligent and engaged. Good. Another question here.
Swamiji, my question is on the word conditioning. When we talk about an upadhi, we use the word conditioning adjunct. So I'm just an apparent conditioning adjunct. So I'm just trying to understand the word conditioning, because when it comes to a personal experience, it is understandable when we say that everything I experience is consciousness, and the mind somehow is able to give me that experience. But in the case of an upadhi for anything out there, what does the word conditioning mean?
We use our famous example. So this clay is conditioned by pot. Pot is an upadhi is our technical word. Pot is an upadhi for clay, meaning the upadhi called pot causes clay to appear in the form of pot. It's actually nothing but clay, but due to an upadhi, clay appears in the form of pot. In the same way, all your experiences are upadhis. Everything that happens in your mind is an upadhi that conditions consciousness. Like clay acquires nama and rupa because of pot, in the same way, consciousness becomes various thoughts, feelings, perceptions due to the upadhi created in the mind. So just as pot conditions clay, your mind conditions consciousness. It's really quite, I think my language was not very helpful there, but it comes down to something very simple. Just like clay, I'll make it worse now. Just like pot conditions clay, notice that it remains nothing but clay. When clay is conditioned by pot, it's still clay. When consciousness is conditioned by your thoughts, it's still consciousness. So we distinguish in this way nama-rupa, pot, from clay, the underlying reality. Any follow-up?
Swamiji, in the context, you also say that form is not a separate thing.
Right.
But if there is conditioning, then there is some vikara, right? In the sense, unchanging consciousness.
How did clay change? There's no vikara means change. Did clay underwent no change? It's still clay. What transformation? There's transformation in terms of nama-rupa. There was a lump, and the lump became pot, but the lump was clay, the pot is clay. Clay undergoes no vikara, no transformation.
So in our understanding of the world then, when we say that talking about it as a projection seems to be more understandable when we say an apparent conditioning, but that the world is nothing but consciousness, things out there, there is nothing but consciousness, but we appear to experience the world because consciousness is conditioned. I think this form is not a thing is the part I'm trying to deal with.
I'm not getting the particular question.
So, how is it that we... I think the way Vedanta explains it is that our experience is not as real as consciousness.
I didn't say that. Well, maybe we could take that experience. Experience is not as real as consciousness, just like pot is not as real as clay. Pot can come and go, clay remains. Experience comes and goes. Consciousness remains. I have a feeling you're making it more, or either you or me, we're making it more complicated than it needs to be. This teaching is actually this part of the teaching of Vedanta is deceptively simple. It simply means to distinguish between form and content. That's it. Form and content. By the way, this goes in Western tradition also. This goes back to Plato. But the debate in Plato's time and in all philosophies is which is more real, form or content? And different philosophies have different conclusions. Plato concluded that the form is more real than the content. He did. Whereas most philosophers, not most, many other philosophers conclude the opposite, that content is more real than form. So we recognize, though, these two perspectives. Can we call them layers of reality? That's helpful. Perspective is good, but I like this concept of layers or levels of reality. At a deeper level of reality, there's no such thing as pot. If pot was an independent reality, show me one without any material, without any content. Give me a pot which has no content. For Plato, that pot existed as an idea. This is one of the unique features of not just his philosophy, but this whole school of philosophy. Vedanta rejects that. And you can see why Vedanta rejects that. Show me a pot without any content. There's no pot without a content. That suggests that content is more real than form, which is not what Plato taught, but it's definitely what Advaita Vedanta and many other traditions teach. And then we apply that to experience. Experience, like pot is a form of clay, experience is a form of consciousness. It's that simple. Like pot is a form of clay, experience is a form of consciousness. That's not complicated. And what that shows is that the form here is somewhat arbitrary. We could change the form, I could break the pot. In the same way, the nature of your experience is arbitrary in the sense it's always changing. But clay remains clay, consciousness remains consciousness. It's that simple. Of course, the implications and dealing with all the ignorance associated is not so simple, but the underlying principle is. Does this answer? Okay, let's take some more questions online. This is Sajat from Dubai. Sajat says, nice segue. What is the upadhi, conditioning adjunct, that makes nirguna Brahman appear to be creator, sustainer, destroyer? Ooh. Okay. Of course, there's a trick here. If you say, leave the word upadhi aside for a moment. If you say, how did nirguna Brahman become creator, sustainer, destroyer? I think we talked about this last week. How did nirguna Brahman become saguna Brahman, ishvara, creator, sustainer, destroyer? Suppose there's a metaphor, and it's a silly metaphor. Suppose you ask nirguna Brahman. Silly, right? But it's a metaphor. It's a thinking experiment. Nirguna Brahman would say, I didn't become anything. I'm just sitting here. I didn't do anything. I didn't become anything. If you could ask clay, why did you become a pot? The clay would say, what pot are you talking about? I'm just... Crackpot is right. Good. The clay would just say, I'm just clay. There's no pot. I didn't become anything. So you see the point. We spoke before about perspective. From the standpoint of clay did not become pot. From the standpoint of nirguna Brahman did not become ishvara, creator, sustainer, destroyer, saguna Brahman. So we have to rephrase the question. How is it that nirguna, how is it that saguna, there we go, we have to shift our perspective. How does saguna Brahman exist? We can't say, how did nirguna Brahman become saguna Brahman? But we certainly can say, how is it that there is a creator, sustainer, destroyer of the cosmos? That question we can approach. Every religion approaches that question differently. Of course, Vedanta is not exactly a religion, so Vedanta will approach that question more philosophically. And Vedanta will say, creator, sustainer, destroyer, technically, saguna Brahman. We use the word ishvara or bhagavan to refer to that same reality. How does it exist? Just like you exist. You exist because of an underlying reality plus a particular name and form. And the powers you possess depend not on your underlying reality, it's the same consciousness for all. The particular powers you possess as an individual human being depend on the package, depend on the upadhi. So, ishvara exists just like you exist because of an underlying reality, because of the same underlying reality, but the package, the upadhi, is quite different. You have limited powers, Ishvara has limitless powers. So the powers are determined by the upadhi. How much water can this pot contain depends on the size of the pot. Doesn't depend on clay. The same clay could be a bigger pot or a smaller pot. So the capability of this pot depends not on clay, the underlying reality, depends on the upadhi. So your powers as a human being depend on your upadhi. Ishvara, as saguna Brahman, depends, the powers to create, sustain, destroy, depend on the package, the upadhi. Next, from Serge. Serge? I'm not sure. It looks like it's maybe a French name. I'm not sure. He's from Quebec, so I'm guessing it's French. Serge. And he asks, nice. I like it. You can't see. He's got the question in Sanskrit. And I like that because it allows some precision in understanding. He says, please explain why it says in the Ashtavakra Gita that the practice of concentration, gaining samadhi, is bondage and small-mindedness. Samadhi is bondage? Samadhi is small-mindedness? And he quotes the verse from Ashtavakra Gita, ayam eva hi te bandhaha samadhim anutishtasi. Samadhim anutishtasi. If you practice samadhi, ayam eva hi te bandhaha. That is your bondage. Your practice of samadhi is bondage. And then he concludes, ma gama kshudra chittatam. Nice. That's an injunctive for our Sanskrit students. Magamaha, don't go there. Don't go where? Kshudra chittatam. Don't practice samadhi because it restricts your mind. Huh? I agree 100%. If you have to understand the Ashtavakra Gita, which is the perspective of Ashtavakra Gita is written from the standpoint of enlightenment. Many people ask, Swamiji, why don't you teach, in fact, I've been asked so many times, please teach Ashtavakra Gita. I'll never teach Ashtavakra Gita. Why? It doesn't teach. It's a statement of enlightenment. It's good for contemplation. It's not good for teaching. To teach, you require methodology. Ashtavakra Gita has no methodology. Basically, Ashtavakra Gita says, you are Satchidananda Atma, you are Atma, which is Satchidananda. Satchidananda Atma is Brahman. So therefore you have no limits, you have no boundaries, you are full, you are complete, you are infinite. All is you are all. Okay. You get my point? Everything is true. And what I said was really kind of clumsy and silly, the way it's taught in Ashtavakra Gita is beautiful. It's very poetic. It's really a wonderful poetic text. But it doesn't teach you how to get there, which is why I don't teach it and don't plan to teach it. So in order to understand the Ashtavakra Gita, let me put it like this. Ashtavakra Gita doesn't give you anything to practice. And it's not something you practice, it's not a methodology that leads you to a discovery. And the reason I'm saying practice is samadhi is a practice, right? If you are practicing samadhi, why are you practicing samadhi? Because you're not enlightened. If you were enlightened, you wouldn't need to practice samadhi. So Ashtavakra says, don't practice samadhi, be enlightened. This is a perspective of the text. If you are you still, a paraphrase, are you still practicing samadhi? What's wrong with you? Really, that's the sense of this verse. And that's the kshudra chittata. Smallness of mind here means smallness of understanding. Your understanding is still limited. You are yet to be enlightened. If you are still practicing samadhi, it means you have not yet reached enlightenment. Go beyond that. That's the idea of this verse. Nice that Serge could quote this verse from the text. Then, a question from Pushkar, who lives in Jaipur. I want to know these terms and their differences. Bhagavan, ishvara, devata, paramatma, and Brahman. Do you know, the good thing about Advaita, not the good thing, one of the unique things about this tradition is that these terms can be defined very simply and accurately. You know, if you are reading the Bible and you read a reference to soul or spirit, you're not exactly sure what these terms mean, soul or spirit. And then it gets more complicated. Is Jesus God? Is Jesus the Son of God? How are they related? I'm just saying that other traditions have a lack of clarity in what particular terms mean. There's no lack of clarity here at all. What is Brahman? And I'm going to just demonstrate how simply these terms can be explained. Of course, to understand thoroughly requires much more. But here's an example of a very simple definition of these terms. Brahman is a reality because of which everything exists. Paramatma is a reality because of which you exist. And of course, the reality because of which you exist and the reality because of which everything else exists are one and the same. Brahman and Paramatma are not two realities, one and the same. What is Bhagavan? Bhagavan is a name for ishvara. Who is ishvara? Creator, sustainer, destroyer. What is devata? A particular facet of ishvara. For example, as the one who bestows blessings, the one who is the bestower of karma, the one who bestows wealth, the one who removes obstacles in life. So a limited aspect of ishvara. How simple. Brahman is a reality because of which everything exists. Paramatma is a reality because of which you exist. Bhagavan is a name for ishvara. Ishvara is creator, sustainer, destroyer. And devata is a particular aspect of ishvara. Bas. Kam ho gaya. That's it. Nothing more be said. Okay. This is a question from Gordon, who lives in Glasgow. Gordon asks, and last week we said, does an enlightened person have an intense desire to help others attain enlightenment? Now, remember the context of that conversation. The presence of any binding desire proves that you are not enlightened. Full stop. If there is a drive, I have to enlighten the world, God save us from such people. Because there's something wrong, something misguided in that. Now, can an enlightened person feel inclined to help other people get enlightened? Why not? But notice that's not a driven agenda. It's not a binding desire. It's, I think, a very natural. It's like if you have something so valuable, if you won in a lottery $100 million, you have such wealth, wouldn't you want to share that with others? Naturally. You couldn't possibly use $100 million. What are you going to do with all that money? So you would naturally want to share that. When you have something of such tremendous value, it's natural to share with others. And I would just add one thing to it. The amazing thing about sharing, maybe a difference, not maybe, a huge difference between sharing money and sharing spiritual wisdom. When you share your $100 million, your wealth goes down. When you share spiritual wisdom, your wisdom goes up. Win-win. It's a good thing. Okay, now let's come back to Gordon's question. I hope I can paraphrase the answer correctly here. No, so does an enlightened person have an intense desire? So he's referring to my response. I hope I can paraphrase your answer here. No, that would be an emotional commitment. I use that word. An emotional commitment means a binding desire and a personal agenda, and that person would be unenlightened. I said teachers answer because they're asked. Enlightened teachers teach because you ask. And now comes the question. Gordon says, this makes me wonder about the nature of compassion. There may be events with an appearance of urgency or crisis when you, in a dream, when you wake up, none of it is taken seriously. Is that like the teacher's perspective? Responding appropriately but not seeing the suffering as being so real, so bitter, so personal, neither coldly indifferent nor falling over oneself to put out every fire. Is compassion different for the enlightened person? No, I think Gordon's got it. The metaphor is a little bit tricky. Suppose, I'm not sure if it quite works. Let's see if we can make Gordon's metaphor work. Suppose you are having a lucid dream. Not an ordinary dream, but a lucid dream. You're dreaming and you know you're dreaming. And you see someone has fallen into a cesspool, filth. And in order to get that person out of the cesspool, you have to walk into that cesspool, into that stinking filth, to pull them out. Now, in a waking dream, you would know that the cesspool is not absolutely real. And you'd see the fellow suffering. And being a normal human being, if you see someone suffering and you can help without any injury to yourself, we have to add that, because we all have a natural instinct for self-preservation. So if you see someone suffering and you can help without injuring yourself, definitely you help. So in the dream, you'll definitely wade into the filth to rescue the person who has followed. And Gordon presents that as a metaphor for enlightenment. And it mostly works. And the point is the enlightened person knows all of this is not absolutely real. But does that mean the enlightened person says, okay, the person is dying, this is happening, bombs are falling in Gaza and Sudan, and millions of people are dying and starving, so what? Why should the enlightened person feel like that? That's kind of inhuman. An enlightened person is a human being, has feelings. Whether you're enlightened or not, you can have empathy. Empathy or compassion means to feel what the other person is feeling, to sense their suffering. And when you sense someone's suffering, and when you can help without injuring yourself, that's natural, absolutely natural. So I think Gordon, you understand quite well, and that is the enlightened person. Let me paraphrase Gordon's words. The enlightened person would respond appropriately. Being neither coldly indifferent nor falling all over oneself to put out every fire. And I think that's the expression. If there were a bug on the road and a big truck aiming for the bug, would the enlightened person run out in front of the truck to save this bug, putting himself or herself at risk of becoming roadkill? That's the point. So, okay. So, quite good. Okay, well, let me ask, do we have other questions here? In back here. In back. Who? Yes, please. Mm-hmm. Tell me. It's okay.
I'd like to know about your perspective, the difference of detach. Not the difference, because I know that there is a big difference about detach and negligence, but the limit. People who are really detached.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, I also love ice cream. I have a relationship with Ben and Jerry's.
Oh, good.
And for me, it's also how much ice cream can I eat? But as well as not neglecting my health.
Right.
There is a limit.
But it's not fixed.
No.
The good thing is, you get to put the line wherever you want. No one tells you where to draw that line. You have to draw that line. You could draw the line too far in one way or the other. So if you draw the line that, I should only have ice cream once in a month, maybe that's a little, at least for me, that would be too far over in that direction. But if you go too far in the other direction, if I like it, then why shouldn't I eat it every day? Twice a day. So that's too far in the other direction, and no one's going to draw that line for you. You have to draw that line. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Yep. You want to follow on? Go ahead. Oh. Yeah. Back here.
In recent weeks, you've been talking about different meditation techniques. And the question came to my mind about what meditation technique should be used for nididhyasana.
So nididhyasana is, thank you, I keep forgetting. Nididhyasana is Vedantic contemplation. Nididhyasana, by definition, is not, you understand this, but just for everyone else's sake, nididhyasana is not meditation. Meditation is meditation, and there are so many kinds of meditation. I can't define meditation in one sentence. There are so many different techniques of meditation. Contemplation, on the other hand, is to reflect on the teachings of Advaita Vedanta that you have already understood, and to see the truth, see the reality of those teachings personally, to personally reflect on the truth of what you have already understood through the teachings of Vedanta, and that is not a meditation practice. So then you ask, what is the best technique to prepare yourself for nididhyasana? I understand this is your question, and it's a good question, because for most people, not all, for most people, nididhyasana should be preceded by a formal meditation practice. So, if your mind is not focused, calm, peaceful, then your nididhyasana, and this is for most people, nididhyasana will not be effective unless it is preceded by a meditation practice that'll make you calm, peaceful, focused, etc. So then finally, to answer your question, what technique is best for making you calm, focused, and peaceful? And you can already anticipate what my answer to that will be. It depends on you. Whatever meditation technique you find personally to make you calm, focused, and peaceful, and prepared for nididhyasana, whatever works for you is the best technique. And you know already that I like to say that meditation techniques are many, and the best technique is the technique that works best for you. There's no one, it's not one size fits all. Okay, any follow-on? Okay, one more question here, in back here.
Swamiji, this question is similar to the one we heard online. Just clarification in the wording, Sanskrit words. What is the difference between Brahman and Brahma? And similarly, what is the difference between Atman, Atma, Jivatma, and Paramatma?
Okay. So this is mostly a grammar question. Seriously. Oh, thank you. I keep forgetting that. All right, thank you. What is the difference between? Actually, I'm going to add more. What is the difference between Brahman, Brahma, and Brahma? 3. Brahman, Brahma, Brahma. The undeclined form is Brahman. The rule in Sanskrit is you can't use words without declining them. So then you have to decline Brahman. How do you decline? You could decline Brahman in the neuter gender, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. So Brahman becomes Brahma in the neuter. Or you can use the word Brahman to refer to God as creator, so-called Brahmaji, Prajapati, in which case you use a masculine termination and it becomes Brahma. So it's grammar. But notice that Brahma and Brahma are very different, right? Brahma, absolute reality. Brahma, God as creator. With regard to Atman, Atma, atma. Okay. Undeclined form is atman. Atma is grammatically incorrect. You should never say atma. Atma is the correctly declined form in the masculine gender. Then, what is paramatma and jivatma? Jivatma is atma with regard to a jiva. Paramatma is atma with regard to atma. So that is to say, consciousness present in your experience, we call jivatma. Consciousness as such, pervading the cosmos, we call paramatma. Good. Nice. And again, I'll just point out that this tradition is very powerful in giving us precise definitions. And this is something my guru really emphasized, because so many teachers fail to use language in a very precise way. And that leads to a lot of confusion. So it's the teacher's responsibility to use words very deliberately, very carefully, filling each word with meaning, defining the words properly, and then being consistent. There are some, I'll just tell a quick joke and then we'll take just a few more questions and then conclude for today. But a good joke is that this Osho, Rajneesh, used to do this all the time to his students, and he drove them crazy. He would use a word in one manner for weeks and months and years, and then suddenly he'd start using the same word in a different way, with a different meaning. His disciples would say, why aren't you being consistent? His reply was, why should I be consistent? Okay. That's Osho. Osho would, if he were sitting here, he'd say, don't expect me to be consistent. Who said? Did I ever say I would be consistent? He was a unique teacher. Unique in the American sense. When somebody serves you some food and it doesn't suit you, you say, oh, that's unique. All right. Okay, a couple more here. This is from Uma, who lives in Chicago. Question: you said that you teach because people ask for. An enlightened person teaches, not because they have an agenda, but because they are asked. When you, meaning me, when you initially moved to New Jersey, wasn't there an agenda to start an ashram and create a space for a local community to gather or learn? You could call that an agenda, but a non-binding agenda? Let me try to define. When we first came here, 2000, we bought this little rustic home. Used to be a farmhouse long ago. So we bought this little thing. And at that point, we weren't sure about a number of things. When I say we, my friend and student Jim. So Jim and I, we located this place, and together we purchased it, meaning we put down the money and took out a mortgage, and we acquired the property. At that time, I remember having a conversation in what's now the library, has a fireplace. And I think we used to sit in front of the fireplace in winter. And I remember having a conversation with Jim at that point when we weren't sure if there would be enough interest in having an ashram in New Jersey. By the way, we came here because everything gets more complicated when you start teaching it. So why here in central New Jersey? When I was teaching at my guru's ashram in Pennsylvania, we saw so many students coming from this area in New Jersey, mostly students of Indian origin, and they would come for a while and then they would stop coming. Why did they stop coming? It was an hour and a half driving to get there. So it led me to think that, well, if there was an ashram where they could go where it was only 20 minutes away, then they could continue to attend. Also, I knew some people who lived in this area, and they would say, oh, wonderful if you could form an ashram in this part of the country. So anyway, that's what led Jim and I to acquire this property. But even then, we weren't sure there would be enough interest. We weren't sure there would be enough financial support. And quite frankly, we weren't sure that the township would allow us to build an ashram here. There are lots of technical rules. But yet we bought this property anyway without knowing all of that. And we said, well, if it doesn't work out to be an ashram, at least we have a nice place to live. A nice rural home in a very beautiful part of New Jersey. You can just live here. Back in those days, I used to travel a lot to teach. Most weekends I would go traveling. So then I would just live here, and then I would go out and travel and teach. So there was an agenda in the sense that it was a good idea. It would be helpful to people in the community if we could develop this ashram. But there was no emotional attachment to creating a successful ashram. If it comes, wonderful. If it doesn't come, what would you say? Yay, BTK. That's also okay. You know, whether it comes like this or whether it comes like that. Okay. This is Uma's question. I think one or two more and we'll conclude. This question is from Sanjay, who lives in Mumbai. He says, does spiritual growth and effort and knowledge get carried forth in the next birth? That is to say, if you strive for enlightenment in this lifetime and come this close, and then gone. Well, Sri Krishna says in the end of the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he says that, if you are so committed to gaining enlightenment in this life, in addition to the good karmas that you gain, you also create, and he doesn't use all these technical terms, but the principle is you create a samskara. Now, samskara is an impression left on the subtle body, that which travels, and that subtle and that impression becomes manifest in the immediately following life. It's an unusual feature. And it's only formed, according to the doctrine of karma, it's only formed through especially intense experience. So the point Sri Krishna makes is if you are really intense in your spiritual pursuit, in your prior life, but fail to make it all the way, Sri Krishna assures Arjuna you will pick up the thread, so to speak, and continue in your next life. Last question. This is from Mike, who lives in Holland. Oh, good. I've always learned that reincarnation is rejected within Advaita Vedanta. From a perspective, it is. In Advaita Vedanta, there's only Brahman. How can there be reincarnation? Right? How can there be a world? How can there be individual people? In Advaita Vedanta, there's only Brahman. In that sense, reincarnation is rejected. However, some Advaita teachers, like Nisargadatta Maharaj, has on multiple occasions said that there is no such thing as reincarnation. When you die, your body will disintegrate into 5 elements, and the fragmented personal consciousness will submerge into the all, and that's it. And that's apparently what Nisargadatta taught, That's not what the doctrine of karma teaches. So Nisargadatta is free. He could, he was an enlightened being. He was free to teach whatever made sense to him. But in this case, what he taught is a little different than the doctrine of karma understood in the mainstream. So in mainstream Hinduism in general, and Advaita Vedanta in particular, reincarnation is accepted at a worldly level. It's rejected at an absolute level, but it's accepted as a worldly level, which means to say that reincarnation is accepted just like we accept the law of gravity. We have evidence for the law of gravity. We have evidence for the principles of karma and reincarnation. So in this way we accept it in a empirical fashion, not in an absolute fashion. But when it comes to empirical things, different teachers can teach different things. For example, Nisargadatta says that when you die, the body will disintegrate into 5 elements. According to science, there aren't 5 elements, right? So, for example, I could say that there are 104 naturally occurring elements, or whatever is the number. So, which means I'm saying something different than Nisargadatta. Who's right? Well, if Nisargadatta says 5 elements, he's referring to the ancient texts, pre-scientific culture. If I say 104 elements, and I'm referring to modern scientific culture, it's a matter of perspective. So where all true, this is a final comment for today, individual, let me make this as clear as possible, among teachers of Advaita Vedanta who we presume to be enlightened. No, 2 factors. Teacher of Advaita Vedanta, and we presume they're enlightened. When they're teaching empirical matters, they can differ. Nisargadatta can say 5 elements, I can say 104. Nisargadatta can say there's no reincarnation, I can say there is. So there can be difference among individual teachers at the level of the world. But when it comes to the absolute reality, there is only Brahman. There's no room for difference. There is only Brahman. Nisargadatta said there's only Brahman. I said there's only Brahman. Chandogya Upanishad says there's only Brahman. Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, all the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, all of our scriptures, Vedanta scriptures say the same truth. There is only Brahman. So the point is, at a relative level, at a worldly level, we should expect differences among different teachers. But at the absolute level, you won't find a shred of difference. Okay, this is a good place to conclude. We'll end with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor Ma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. See you next time.